What's up, Mike?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Looking forward to getting into this thing. It's also like figuring out Zoom.
Yeah. I haven't even bothered trying any of the stuff with classes, so
I've
good
used
luck.
this for like a few staff meetings and coaching meetings, and that's about it. Those were always at home, where I have terrible service, so it always freezes. So I'm really hoping that was the internet service because I'm at the gym now where it's way better. So hopefully
Yeah,
that's happen.
so far it's pretty clear, and yeah.
Very cool. See, Amber, Ariel, Walter, Jordan. This is cool. I'm liking this group. Heck yeah. Amanda, that's what we're talking about. I'm excited. I didn't even get a chance to look at the registration list, so I'm glad people signed up. It's good to see you too, Mike, man. So,
Well, I didn't even know if this was like just if you sent it to specific people or if this was open to anybody, because I had probably at least 3 people off the top of my head that I thought would probably be interested in this, and I didn't send them anything.
oh man, yeah. I mean, if you want to, feel free to send it, or like as long as it records, then I'm gonna post it later as well.
Well, I might just tag him in that then once you post it out on your socials, and
that's cool.
because we got the guy that kind of works as our strength coach at the high school. He would definitely be interested in some of this stuff. This is kind of stuff that him and I talk about all the time. So
let's see. So a few more minutes, but so right now, so you're the only one right now that actually had me in class. So I mean, like it's
So I already know what I'm in for. There, everybody else is just in for a surprise.
Well, I have notes. I mean, that's more prep than I had most.
I was going to say, what's surprising? I am shocked you have notes. Do you at least have 3 things to drink?
I only got one, and you know what's great? I'm on day 40 of 40 without coffee.
I saw you post something about that. That absolutely was shocking. What brought that on?
It was just one of those random, sudden decisions to do something. I wanted to do something that I wouldn't want to do just to like make myself uncomfortable and kind of work on that part of my brain.
And I'm sure all this stuff is probably testing that more than anything.
Yeah. I was like, what time to not be drinking coffee exactly? What's up, John? See, man. Yeah, Britt, this is cool. It's amazing. I like it.
Hi.
Hello, how's it going, Britt? Cool. Let's see. I'm thinking this is everybody. So Mike here is a soccer coach and teacher for Cannon Upshur High School, and has had me in class actually at WVU. Don has also had. Did you have me in class or just intern? You had me in both, right?
What's that?
You had me in both class and then internship and gym member, right? You had me.
Correct. I did my main one with Tanner, but then I did extra with you and him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And what's the name of your college again? You're working at right now?
I'm at Framingham State.
Framingham State. That's it.
Yeah.
I wanted to say like Farmingham or something, but it wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
And Brittany is a coach and trainer down in Huntington. Amber, I don't know if you can hear me, Amber. I mean, you're unmuted. I mean, you're there, but is a trainer there. I don't know what you're doing right now. Ariel's gym member, strong woman, and then Amber, go ahead.
No, we're pulled out of the high schools right now, so I'm just kind of doing some admin work from home and getting a chance to think about some new policies that we didn't have the chance to work on when we're treating kids. So.
All right. Are you in up still like Southern PA?
Yeah, so I'm in Peters Township High School. It's around McMurray, so in between like just south of Pittsburgh.
Okay, sweet. And Ariel says a multi-strength athlete / gym member at Viking / is working on her doctorate right now, and actually has some research papers that she's going to send me sometime. Jordan is, I think, the youngest one here, and is a soccer athlete that I've had for 5 years, and that made her get on the call. A quick thing on Jordan here. Her career goal is to once she's done with college and playing soccer, is to go to PT school and open up a PT / Viking somewhere.
Awesome.
Nice.
Then we got Amanda, another resident strong woman here. Walter, a resident strong man guy who's actually in CPAS right now. Strength and conditioning. Well, actually, you straight up CPAS, you strength and conditioning minor, Walter?
I'm a minor in CPAS. I'm doing the strength conditioning minor.
Okay, cool. I wasn't 100%. Mr. Paul Mauser, who's just some guy. I don't know. He's been part of the gym since before it even opened, technically, but is officially a staff member as of 3 months ago. But, of course, he's a promoter for all the shows and stuff like that that we have here as well. Then we got, let's see, big Dom Rondinelli. What's up, man? Another former class guy. Where are you right now, Dom?
Tampa, Florida.
You're in Tampa? Okay, sweet. So, how's the weather? How's Barwis?
Barwitz is good. I left there a few months back, though. So
that's what I thought. You still probably saw him or talked to him, though.
Yeah, got contractor job with fighter pilots, strength conditioning coach. So
very nice, very cool.
I had to adjust my hours, as you probably know.
Oh yeah. I know you were doing like crazy. You had like a 3-hour drive or something, didn't you?
3-hour drive and working, with Mike Barwitz 12, 14-hour days. So
yeah. Then let's see, Andrew Janosik there. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. How's things on your end?
Not too bad. Thanks for putting this on. I know Chris Alloy, so I was one of Chris Alloy's students.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
So he pushed this out yesterday. I figured I'd join in. I'm actually working on my CFCS right now, so this is kind of right along with what I'm trying to teach myself. So
that's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. We miss Chris here too. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I actually just left the unit up there, so I'm not training with him anymore. But yeah, I miss him.
Okay. And then Calvin, who has been a VPT coach. So if you've ever been to VPT at all, you've met Calvin because he's been here since we're kind of confused. We can't remember if it's either the second day or the second week we were open, one or the other. It's I don't know. He just walked in and started working. Cool. All right. So I said I wanted to do this just looking. I mean, basically on my end, hopefully everybody's in, VPT's in. Trying to use these whole lockdown situation that everybody's got something different. Just trying to figure out new ways to talk with people, get things going. To me, okay, there looks like my camera's somewhat freezing. Again, I apologize because that's something that's happened to me in the past anyway. But hopefully, if nothing else, you can keep hearing or listening to me. And feel free to jump in too, things like that. I've never been on the side that involved raising hands, stuff like that. So I mean that I know that's a thing, but you can either try it that way, or if you even have something, either a question or you want to even add something, feel free to just unmute and throw it in there. Kind of like a nice little fun open class session. But yeah, one of the ideas that came up was that enjoyed teaching in general, and then I always seem to talk to whether it's people I had in class before, just other coaches, or people reaching out and just ended up talking different, whether it's strategy or science. I mean, I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with Don a few months ago. I literally sat in the Giant Eagle parking lot that entire time, just talking. Because in his case, for example, he was taking over at Framingham, and typical 17, 18 teams, one-man staff, sharing a rec center with the students. So again, just brainstorm things like that. So I figured kind of bringing in some old school class type stuff will work out. So I'll go ahead and get started though. I figured neuromuscular physiology would be one of the first ones to get into. Again, trying to cut out as much of the physiology as kind of just for classes sake a lot of times, and actually looking at how it builds up in all these pieces into sports, fitness, performance, training, everything that we're doing like that. And because again, a lot of places where I see just as a whole, whether you're in strength and conditioning, whether you're more of a sports skill coach or a fitness coach, is that a lot of people never seem to go deep enough into how many things they might be able to control or how many different outcomes they might be able to actually create with their training with just a little bit more attention to detail. Most of the time it wouldn't take a crazy overhaul, but almost every exercise that you do in training. And again, this isn't only in strength and conditioning, but I could easily see this being done in a sports realm as well. Almost every exercise has at least 2, 3, if not 5, 6 or more variables that you can change, with the rest of the exercise being the same, and make the training effect a little bit more specific towards a certain goal. And I think what made me really think about this actually was just at the beginning of the week, or maybe it was last week, I can't remember. I put out a question about, what people were struggling with right now in training. And there was someone else, like another like coach / trainer, whatever, who's here in the area. And, like the answer, like it was a good one. It was a good answer. But what bothered him the most, he said, was, already getting bored with bodyweight exercises for training people, because there's only so many bodyweight exercises you can do. And again, it's like, that's true, but that's also the black and white version of what you can actually do. Because like you may not have equipment. Like, if you have equipment and stuff like that, stuff's going to be easier for people. But even if you don't, there are so many ways to change the exact same exercise based on whether you want to focus more on targeting like the muscles themselves, the nervous system itself. If there's a certain type of like speed and contraction you want to use, there's so many ways to like add color and variation, or even just the angle, like a lunge done with your flat foot forward is different than a lunge done keeping that front heel like a half inch off the ground. Like simply by shifting your weight from the flat part of your foot to the ball of your foot is going to drastically change how that lunge actually trains the athlete. Like, so, like just to finish that example, you take that lunge, pick that heel up a half inch, so it's no longer making contact anymore. It's going to put more emphasis on the front part of your leg, so your anterior muscles, like your quads, especially mainly your quad, your tibialis anterior, they're going to take more stress because the back part of the foot's not on the ground. And that's also the part that's also working the lever in the way speed works. So like kind of one quick little clip, like saying I always use is like, if you're training force, have your heel on the ground. If you're training speed, have the ball of your foot on the ground. Like that's pretty much like one fast difference right there. Push off from the ball of the foot and the big toe if you're trying to do more speed work. If you're trying to do more strength work, keep that heel solid so you can drive through and get your glutes, your hamstring, your posterior chain involved. So like, anyway, that one little change in conversation, I think, is like the first thing that led into thinking that this could be a cool first topic. So in neuromuscular physiology, remember that all movement occurs because of the nerves are telling the muscles to pull. Like that's everything. Something tells the nervous system gets a signal, and whether it's an outside signal, like whether it's something visual, whether it's a touch or a sensation, or it could be internal, like just your thought, then has to travel through the nerves to tell those muscles to then pull, and that'll pull the bones and actually like move the body. Again, like, so it always comes down to what's the best connection you can get from your nerves to your muscles. So when it comes to strength and conditioning, training, sports, fitness, really what we're trying to do is getting as many nerves as possible to tell as many muscle fibers as possible to pull fast and hard over and over again. Like that's basically like those are the main things we're looking at, is like pull fast, pull faster, try to pull as hard as you can, and try to do it over and over again. Like I said, like that's basically what it comes down to. It's not this like magical transference of exercises and training that magically will make you better at cutting on a soccer field or jumping up to get the rebound or driving through people in football, or again, just even as like a soccer mom or something that's going to make you better able to, play with your kids or just like carry groceries or like household equipment around, So again, so there's all these specifics we can do just by like this connection of the nervous system with the bony system, with the muscle system. So basically we're looking at what's strength, what's speed, what's power, and then what's acceleration, force development, and endurance. So again, strength is going to be caused by how hard the muscles are directly pulling on the bones, right? Sounds, pretty straightforward and obvious. But things that are going to affect that are how many muscle fibers are actually being recruited or actually being used to create the movement, and how thick and big the muscle fibers themselves are. So when we're looking at strength, we're looking at an amount of muscle fibers and the thickness of them. When we're looking at speed, we're trying to get that nervous impulse as fast as possible to the muscles to just create a movement and make it, and again, like just as quick as possible. Power is the combination. That's when we're looking at getting as many muscle fibers active as we can through as many nerves as possible, while the nerves are also getting as many more to join in and create the movement as possible, and trying to create the best of both worlds. How much force can we create in the shortest possible time? So speed, strength, and power, they all work together. They're all just different variations of the same thing. Then we have acceleration. At that point, getting that speed, that force, but trying to continually create more force in the shortest possible time, each corresponding second after that. Again, like acceleration is all. Again, think about that. Like the whole difference between velocity and acceleration is that acceleration is trying to get better every second, and for most athletes, that's what they're really looking at. So speed is nice, but acceleration involves having that speed, like it's squared. It's like you want to get, not just be fast, but then you want to be getting faster in a shorter amount of time. So that's where a lot of this that we're going to go over is going to be looking at, like how can we hit the training to hit each one of these things and then really bring it together in acceleration. Rate of force development is the exact same thing as acceleration, but it's generally considered slower and having to overcome more resistance. So it's usually like having to overcome more, just more resistance. There's more of an obstacle. There's more force generated in rate of force development. Let's look at acceleration. Can be seen, with like the classic example of a sprinter, of like a 100-meter sprinter, and watching them actually just run through and keep getting faster and faster as they're moving. To me, rate of force development, same idea, but the best analogy that I've ever thought of, for me anyway, to see rate of force development is like the idea of taking a car from 0 to 60, because it starts at 0. It's so that initial push is pure force, and getting that force just enough to start moving, and then increasing speed to try to get more force out of it. And then of course you have endurance of all of them. So the ability to not just be strong, not just have explosive power, not even just be fast, but create it over and over and over again, whether it's for completely different efforts, like in a game that has stops, or even just one long effort, like in a true endurance athlete. Anybody got anything to add on that for kind of more specifics? Rate of force development is probably one of my favorite little nerdy things. I still remember first coming across that concept. It was probably in T Nation, to be honest. Have you guys seen TNation.com or Testosterone Nation? That's probably where it first started. I don't know. Okay, so yeah.
In CPAS, we often use RFD as a. Oh, hello.
Yeah. I heard you. I heard you start anyway.
Yeah. In CPAS, we often say that RFD is a really good thing to measure in terms of gauging fatigue, because apparently it's one of the first things that drops off. Could you kind of elaborate on that? If that's correct, if it's wrong, how you can kind of apply that?
No, yeah, that's definitely true. because speed tends to drop off faster than everything else, or like, which there's going to come like an angle of this is going to come in at the end of this. But speed tends to drop off the fastest because it's very hard for you to like. Everybody has a limit of how long they can keep getting faster. You know, you hit that max speed, but it takes speed takes the biggest consumption of physical resources. So inside your body, as it's burning through that fuel, through ATP being what that fuel is, as it's burning through that, speed can only continue to rise as you have mostly high quality fuel and ATP. So as you start getting through that, especially like ATP sources by themselves, they only last, it's generally you're in 10 seconds for the ATP phase to start kicking over to glycolysis, to the next phase of burning energy. And even the first 6 seconds are significantly different than seconds 7, 8, 9, and 10. Because seconds 0 through 6, you're generally running on pure ATP, which is imagining that you're like the best fuel that your body has. So it's the highest quality fuel, so you can get the most pure power out of it, the most pure speed out of it. Even once you hit seconds 7, 8, 9, and 10, while it's mostly still the same energy system running, at that point in time, you've already gone through such a high percentage of your ATP, again, like just your fuel, since we didn't get into that part, that you're actually already running into recycled versions of it or like lesser versions of it. Like the whole idea of ATP is that it has 3 phosphagen ions in every molecule, and then every single one of those ions is energy. But once you start getting to seconds 7, 8, 9, and 10, you start coming across a lot more of them that actually only have 2 or even 1 of those phosphagen ions. And it's just like the fuel source itself starts to drop down in quality. And so they're called ADP and AMP, respectively. Which again, like, that doesn't matter except for maybe Andrew there, and well, you too, Walter, for like class-wise. But so I mean, one of the biggest differences is hard to keep up is because even the fuel source itself is breaking down. So at some point that quality breaks down, and again, it might, in a well-trained athlete, it will almost be like negligible or something you can barely like check out, like you can barely notice it if at all, but it still is happening. And it's still something that, yeah, like if you're able to actually check data, is it's going to show up in actual data. But I said it's going to happen. It's like the best trained athletes of any sport that go past 10 seconds are not trying. It's not that they can continue getting faster, but through power output after 10 seconds, it's that they've trained their next energy system to be almost as fast as the one before it. And then they have like energy and momentum on their side, possibly more strength on their side. And at that point, they end up being able to make up for the lack of high energy, high speed fuel through positive momentum and force production. Like ways to, like a couple of examples just to show that difference in fuel, or like how well like world-class athletes can really focus or improve those, how much energy they can go through, is like one short example would be like look at most 200-meter sprinting champions. You know, you're looking at 19 to low 20 seconds. And, like isn't the world record like 19.9 or 6 or something like that? I can't remember. But anyway, the second 100 meters is almost always faster than the first one for the world class guys. It's not like that for, say, like your random state finalist. Their second 100 meters is probably going to be slower than their first. But when you get to the true elite levels, their second 100 meters is better than their first. Now, the thing is, they actually have less true power production at that point because again they're past that 10-second mark and they're starting to get to slightly lower quality fuel, or the ability to replenish it isn't quite as fast as it was, but they have so much momentum by going into that second 100 meters like already running and sprinting, and their muscles themselves are already engaged and getting used to like reproducing force, that it allows that top level guy to, like, they're so close that they can actually move faster because they have those two things on their side that they didn't have at the start. Looking at a similar example, Walter, is like I think one of the craziest, like, track and field is amazing when it comes to strength and conditioning science, because it's, well, for one, it's like 13 different sports or something. Track and field's not a sport, it's a collection of sports. But also because it's the closest thing to actual strength and conditioning as a sport. It's just like, oh, like how high can you jump, how fast can you run, just like that. And to me, one of the most impressive guys is El Garouge, who I don't know if he still has it, but he was the like mile record holder for a very long time. And it's something ridiculous, like 3 minutes and 43 seconds or something like that. You can think about it. So it's approximately like 56-second 400s, 4 of them in a row. So if you think of somebody who can do that, then it's almost like, to the person who has never studied it before, it would be assumed, or very easy to assume, that athlete can run one of the fastest 400s in the world if he, doesn't have to do it 4 times in a row and just puts that extra energy into one. But again, he's trained his energy system so finely tuned to that time frame, where he has pretty much like one top speed and can just keep it longer because of how fast he's turning that energy through. So rate of force development is one of those key things that your better athletes will find ways to keep it lasting longer. And more importantly, they'll find other things like their strength, their strength and their actual strength endurance to start making up for the speed that they're losing from their energy. Does that make sense, Walter?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Like it's definitely a good one. And even like, it's one classic way when training speed or power, if you are looking for rate of force development, like some people rather than say like sets and reps will measure a speed. And again, this can be like truly measured, but honestly, it doesn't necessarily have to. If you've been at it for a while, when a certain athlete looks fast and when they don't. So, and that's just like, for some speed exercises, just stopping it whenever it starts to look slower rather than like based on sets and reps. So that way you don't start training, like bad reps or slow reps, but you can stop it while that speed's still high. So like actually physically in the weight room and in training, or another good way to be like that, for example, for Mike there, would be for sprints. Same idea. Like if you have practice, you're doing sprints with your athlete, or Dawn, like if you're doing sprints with your athletes and you're legitimately doing them because you actually want them to get faster for speed, it's not conditioning, then as soon as they look like they're starting to slow down, go ahead and stop. Either give them a longer break and see if they can, get a couple more reps after that, or just stop either way. Because I said, once you see that speed drop, then you will start actually possibly making the speed worse, or at least just not making it better.
Well, rarely do we do sprint work for more than, say, like 20 yards. Because at least in a typical high school soccer game, if you're going a full-on sprint, like either on a breakaway or after a ball, very rarely you're doing that for more than 20 yards. So
yeah,
anything past that is almost it's more conditioning at that point and not sport-specific training. Yeah,
and I'm really glad to hear that, because that idea is still so deep in so many coaches. The idea that you have to run, that like sprints or speed have to be conditioning. You have to run fast. It has to be go, go, go. Like rest periods are bad. Like that idea is so ingrained in so many different sports. But that's like you said, like most sports have much shorter actual time frames of acceleration. Yeah.
Well, that's the biggest thing. Like I tell the students from other sports, or if my newer young assistant coaches I get, the biggest thing I always preach to them, and from a soccer coach perspective, is we don't use. I'm not a big using any type of anything as punishment anyway, but the biggest thing I tell them is that don't use running. And I said that's a focal point of our sport. I said if you feel like you need a need to do any kind of like physical punishment with a player or a team, do something that's not relative to what our sport is, a plank or a burpee or something, just to get your point across if you deem it necessary. But once they start to make that connection with running as punishment, then when we do it for conditioning purposes or sport training purposes, then there's a hate to it. And I spent a long time, like you said, because there's still a lot of people that think that way. And, in our area, and it, in Upshur County, there's a lot of people that have an old school sense of thinking, and anything you do slightly different is not always welcome. So it's taken a long time to kind of get that mentality out of the way. And now the guy, and the biggest thing is I'm honest with them. I'll tell my players, I said, look, when we run, there's a purpose behind it. I'm never just going to have you do something just to do it. I was like, there's always a rhyme and reason to it.
Yeah. And like one last thing to go with that before moving on is athletes will, like, their physical characteristics will start to match what their sport is like when it comes to this. When they start specializing, or just also part of it, like being good at different sports. Excuse me. For example, like I said, like your better soccer players will find that they can reach their max, like they have much higher acceleration, just like you said, those first 20-30 meters, and then they're already pretty close to their max speed. Their max speed, though, may not be as good as, say, an actual like 100 or 200 meter runner, but the 100, 200 meter runner takes a much longer time to reach that top speed, so they accelerate longer. Because I remember there was a study done 10, maybe 15 years ago, and it wasn't big enough to really be considered like a study from the publishing sense, but it was just comparing a handful of different elite athletes. And like Ronaldo, the soccer player, had like the top acceleration of all the athletes, including 100-meter sprinters, for 30 meters. But then he was tapped out. Like his max speed had already been reached, and it actually started to decrease towards the end because he'd already reached it and maintained it for a while. But so he could beat everybody in that 30-meter race. But then you had like your 100-meter guys beating everybody past that because they were still accelerating through meters 40, 60, 70, 80. And there's even, again, like one of the old classic what ifs is in the Carl Lewis what's the name of the guy, the famous race, Ben Johnson. In the Carl Lewis Ben Johnson race, that it's 100 meter, there's 100 meters because that's what they race, but if it had been 110, that the result would have switched, because like video tracking was showing that Ben Johnson was actually still catching up to Carl Lewis through the 100, and likely would have passed him in 10 more meters, like within 10 more meters if that race happened. But it didn't, because that's not the race, so it wasn't important. But just crazy how you see like those results match each other as they go for different sports. Very cool. Okay, so back to the pure physiology part of it. Everything that's like, so we talked about fuel source a lot. Otherwise, performance is going to live and die by the motor unit. Like the motor unit is pretty much like the thing we are focusing on with training. Again, like, so a motor unit is, again, most of you already know, but motor unit is that one nerve cell, or that one nerve fiber, and all of the different muscle fibers that it communicates to. So again, it's always one of those key things to remember, is that one single nerve fiber communicates with several to many muscle fibers at one time. And it's usually, they always say the number's 5 to 500. They can say, like there might be only 5 muscle fibers in a motor unit, And, that's typically for like very finely tuned control, like eye twitch movement, for example, all the way up to 500 muscle fibers being run by a single nerve fiber. And that's for like your gross force, screw dexterity and control. We're trying to smash things, so like your quads, your glutes, those are your big ones. And like Andrew Walter, I can guarantee you there will be multiple questions as to how many muscle fibers are in a motor unit on the CSCS exam, and also whether or not the muscle fibers can be, whether or not a motor unit can have more than one nerve fiber, and the answer is no. So every motor unit only has one nerve fiber. Again, that is directly going to be on CSCS exams. So that motor unit is now, Cam's here and is going to make me look bad. You're not moving. It's not really you, Cam. I'm not moving either, but
what's going on, man?
Hey, man.
Sorry, man.
Glad you made it. Cam here is a mostly boxing-based trainer up in PA right now, but also former gym guy.
Yeah.
And former damn good boxer.
I appreciate it, man.
You got it. So when it comes to the motor units, I said, like, this is where most of the power comes from. Most of the strength and power comes from when we're training people. And most of it is going to come, like, the biggest thing we want to look at for most people is neuromuscular recruitment, which is how many motor units, so again, how many muscle fibers through their corresponding nerve cells can we make an athlete contract in any given motion, whether it's in the weight room, in training, or in sports itself, or again, just for the general fitness person trying to feel faster. Like, that's one thing, when I feel like the biggest connection a lot of people sometimes fail to make when looking at fitness versus strength and conditioning. And, like Brittany, for example, Cam, any of you guys who work with a lot, Amber maybe, or like just anybody who works with like combination of athletes and or general fitness, you can probably tell me this is like true or if I'm completely wrong. If there is that disconnect between training an athlete and training a fitness person, the biggest thing that most people don't realize or think about is if you become more powerful, even just enough to feel faster, stronger to have more force output. Again, that combination of being stronger and moving faster makes almost everybody just feel healthier. Like, nobody that I know of ever was suddenly able to move things faster or create like just more power and was like, man, I don't know, I'm just trying to like actually I just don't feel any better. I don't feel any healthier. Like, there's a direct relationship between power and speed and health and fitness. And again, like, most people never realize that. In fact, I don't think I've thought that, but I don't think I've ever said that out loud until right now. But it's a very real connection. And actually, when you, again, to like show how true this is for people, when you're talking with like even older populations, mortality, here are like the handful of things that tend to decrease, like give you surprisingly accurate judgments of older people's mortality. One is grip strength. Again, so their ability to actually like grip strength, huge relationship to mortality and cardiac health. And it has to do partially, and actually even Ariel, if you know any more details about this, feel free to chime in. But a lot of it has to do with the relationship between the force, how it like squeeze, like kind of that occlusion from squeezing your blood vessels and everything tightening that generally comes with grip, and the relationship of those veins and arteries with the heart. And just also the like how grip tends to be a very accurate, just kind of like showcase of just what general strength and fitness people are in. So grip is one when it comes to mortality. So there's importance in being able to open your own pickle jars, even late in life. There's another one is the ability to pick yourself up off the floor without using, any extra help if needed. And again, that comes down to like just your ability to still move your body and obviously actual fall risk. But then another one is working with speed, because again, if you can start creating speed, then you almost automatically are creating force. And also, if you can work some speed, you're almost automatically challenging your body's balance system better than before. Because to work fast, it has to be in more control. I said, so anything like that, like for like things like medicine ball throws, or again, like punches, if they're healthy enough to do little jumps or anything, like speed, grip, picking yourself off the floor. 3 things that, especially when you get to people like their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, are huge when it comes to just like markers of general health. But so that, so bringing that back around, your ability to control, to recruit and activate as many muscle fibers as possible, that neuromuscular recruitment percentage. And it's the biggest change in most people when they train. So the average person, when they come in and like they have not trained before, they have not been an athlete before, or it's been several years and they've been fairly normal / sedentary, the average person's recruitment is only about 40 to 50% when they're untrained. Meaning at any given point in time, for like different muscles or body parts, they can only actually use 40 to 50% of the muscle there at any given point in time. So again, so they have, whatever muscle they have, but they can't even use half of it. Like you said, when they need to. And that's one big reason that they tend to feel out of shape or slow or weak. And it's just like they can't use it. It's only 40 to 50%. And so as you're improving this, it's not, it makes such a difference that it's not just a simple game of adding. So like if you get somebody from 40% to 80%, they're not twice as strong or twice as fast. It is way more than that. Because it just like how much extra muscle fiber activated tends to be able to help the others or the nerves. This is in essence why, take 285-pound guys and, like one who's never really trained before may struggle benching, between 95 and 135 pounds, and take a 185-pound guy who's like a junior on the college football team, and there's a good chance that guy's benching over 300. Same size, but his ability to recruit that many more muscle fibers is just like it's like ridiculously higher and insane. So most people start 40 or 50%. Generally being active at all, especially if it's something intense or with some form of training program, will get people up to that, like roughly in the 60s. So that will increase almost automatically. What most people think of as the newbie gains, like especially they haven't trained in a while, they've never trained, they get all that progress. I think it's because they're learning how to recruit more muscle fibers through getting more motor units involved, and learning also how to like they're greasing these movement patterns in their brain at the same time. And again, they're seeing big jumps in their progress because they're suddenly using more of the muscles that they already have by activating a greater amount of nerves that they already have. So again, it's like most of those newbie gains is almost all based on the nervous system. And again, so you can go from 40 to 50 to usually the 60s just by training regularly. That's it. And again, it doesn't have to be lifting or anything. Just anything more intense. From there, getting to the 60s into the 70s, again, that takes it's still pretty straightforward at that point, but it has to start being intense, and it has to be intense and progressive. It can't just be like kind of. It has to be something to this point where now you're doing, whether it's sprinting or heavier lifting or some type of explosive, like, jumping. There has to be something that keeps pushing you forward, and it takes much longer to get from, say, 65 to 75% than it does from 40 to even 65. Like I said, those first jumps can happen really fast. After that, they tend to slow down a good bit, 65 to 75%. Now, 75% and up is when that's when you start getting to much more advanced, much more elite levels. of that recruitment. That's when it gets harder. Like it might take someone just as long to get from 75 to 80% or 80 to 85%. 85 is like, at that point you're already talking elite. Like I said, like above 80s is pretty close to elite. It's very hard to track this. I mean, for most trainers, most coaches, you really can't. It's just going to be, am I continuing to make progress? This is why it becomes so much more important to be specific as your athletes progress. But it's also why it's nice because, you don't need to get too insanely, you can save your more intense recruiting methods for once an athlete is advanced than it is needed at the beginning. Because it might take an athlete longer to get from 80 to 85% than it took them to get from 40 to 79% all that time. Like that's that much harder to get. I said they can measure this electronically, and I said like generally your top athletes in the like your best of the best when it comes to the muscles that they actually like rely on for their sport are generally found to be at about 95%, which is crazy. So again, that's you're talking like, for example, like world-class cyclists in their quads, or like say like your best pitchers in their like through their abs and their hips. Like it's the relationship there is crazy. There's actually, let's see, looking through here real quick. Walter, some of the strongmanest people here may know is, so for example, there's a guy out there named Dennis Rogers, who nobody for the most part would have any reason to ever know who that is unless you're just into absurd things of strength or grip sports. But so he's just like 65-year-old dude now probably, who looks like he just looks like kind of like, somebody's granddad or older uncle who's like always been like that biker uncle or granddad in the family. And but it's like grip strength is his thing. He's like 5'7", I don't know, like 165 pounds, but he's also making pure iron wrenches and bending them into shapes. And like I said, he's like one of the top crazy grip guys in the world. And the reason I bring him up is because he actually took one of these tests at one point in time, like got measured, and he was recruiting about 95 to 98% of the motor units through his arms and into his hands when doing grip strength work. As I said, so he was able to recruit almost every single muscle fiber running through his hands at the exact same time. But that's how he was able to create that. So neuromuscular recruitment is a crazy thing. It also, like, otherwise, the other place you see this just is it's not the only reason, but that recruitment percentage up high is one of the top reasons, or like one of the top things you see whenever you hear about people having an adrenaline dump, and especially in those life-saving situations, super high fight or flight situations, like the mom who picks up a car off of her kid or something like that. Whenever they do that, then the adrenaline hits so high because of the stressful situation that adrenaline just pushes everything into nearly maximal overdrive. And somebody who literally may have been living their life at 45% neuromuscular recruitment can suddenly hit close to 100. And that's how the mom can just randomly pick up that vehicle or that van, and when she, like, at that moment in time when she needs to. The downside is the body still has to go through that. So if that is somebody who lived most of their life in 45, 50, 55% neuromuscular recruitment, and all of a sudden their muscles, their tendons, their ligaments, their bones had to be exposed to what their body can really do when it was all turned on, then generally their body is going to be very broken afterwards. There are reports out there of people who've gone through these adrenaline dumps, and teeth have just disintegrated, or they've snapped tendons and ligaments, like bones have in essence broken in half, because their body just had no way of dealing with that amount of pressure and stress because it had never been through anything close to it. So it did what it needed to do. The emergency response was effective, but they couldn't handle it otherwise. There was one a few years back where the opposite happened, and it was a recorded adrenaline dump, but the guy was a University of South Florida lineman. And, so this was somebody who was already strong, who was already used to like heavy weights and high force. And it was in one of those car situations. He heard something and found somebody trapped in the car. He had the adrenaline dump and moved the car by himself after like 3 or 4 people before him hadn't been able to do it together. And then he just continued to go into the restaurant and have dinner. Because again, his body was, he couldn't do that any minute he wanted to, but because he was at least way more used to recruiting all those motor units, then he was able to like just function fine afterwards. So the ability of your body to actually have trained into that, it's like it makes a big difference. So anyway, the recruitment itself. So breaking it down to just one thing, what creates that motion is called an action potential. And most of you guys who've had some form of education is remember that. Again, all that means is you had enough of a signal, of a chemical signal, of an electrical signal, I should say, go through your body to release a hormone, acetylcholine, and have that travel through basically from nerve to the receiving points in the muscle fibers, and that creates action. Again, so the action potential itself actually refers to electricity. And so again, a lot of times I forget, don't think about it a lot, but a lot of times it's just forget that electricity is what's running your body in terms of like that signal from nerve to muscle. And so the reason I bring that up is because luckily not every stimulus creates that electrical charge like high enough to create movement, or else we would be constantly jittery messes. There are actually, I believe, and again, Ariel, with what she's been studying and everything, she might be able to throw things in here. But there are like some of the issues that people have with neuromuscular control or deterioration. Some of those involve action potential thresholds basically dropping, so lower levels of stimuli actually make their body continue to respond. So it's much harder for that person to stay controlled, let alone relaxed. So getting these movements to be strong enough to create these action potentials is big. And it also can be changed based on, the most direct change is calcium, because if you don't have calcium, then this can't happen, or it won't happen as well. Sodium's another big one. They can also be changed directly by stimulants or depressants. So like your caffeine, your pre-workout, etc., they will actually drop that threshold where your action potential makes movement happen. So your body will actually react sooner or to lower levels of stimulus while under a stimulant. Vice versa, if you're under a depressant, like whether it's alcohol or beta blocker or just something else like that, then it'll actually take a bigger stimuli to get your muscles to move because your body is so relaxed and not creating that. So what can you do with an athlete or the trainee to recruitment? Again, that's what's going to be most of this moving forward. Again, so all these motor units, once that action potential has been reached, again, they're recruited, they create force by pulling together and moving the bones, and then they relax. So they always have to relax. Remember, they can't just pull forever. Or they can, then you're locked in tetanus. But other than tetanus, they pull and then you relax. So you got a couple of different types of contraction here, or activation of that motor unit. You have the impulse. The impulse is just that super quick, light movements, just based on speed, fast action. It's usually a quick reactive movement with very little force because it happens so quick. So again, remember that force is directly going to be related to time. Now, the more you train an athlete to be strong in shorter periods of time, they'll be able to create more force in the same amount of time. So again, a better athlete can create more force in 0.2 seconds. There's 2 Andrew Janisics, and one of them is Chris Eloy. It took me a second. Something was throwing me off, and I was like, what is that?
I could not find the link, so I had him email me.
Okay. That works. But anyway, so in 0.3 seconds, just as an example, in 0.3 seconds, a better trained athlete can create more force than a lesser trained athlete. Or we can also look at it as the same amount of force that takes a regular athlete, say 0.5 seconds to reach, an elite athlete might be able to create that amount of force in 0.4 seconds. So that athlete is more likely to win, or hence why they're better prepared. But in every case, whether it's a new trainee, whether it's a regular athlete, whether it's an elite athlete, more time is going to equal more chance to produce more force. So there's always, again, nobody starts off with just that maximum force. So impulse contractions are those very first ones. Those are those really quick ones, but sometimes that's enough. Again, so for one, that your impulse is what creates that first step. That's what creates that, quick little touch of the ball to move it out, 2 more feet compared to where somebody was about to be. It's what creates that quick jab to an opponent right when they're about stepping in. Again, it's all that just super fast, relatively low force impulse speed, that quickness of movement. It's very reactive, and it's very as soon as it's almost the movements that for the better athletes, they're not even thinking about doing it. They just train themselves to be that quick to a certain reaction. Then you're going to have frequency, which is how many times motor units can be contracted for a certain movement. This is when you start looking at fast repetitions. So this is your actual ability to increase running speed. This is your ability to continue accelerating through those first few yards of the sprint. This is your ability to, not just make those first few movements, but to keep cutting, keep changing direction. This is frequency of motor unit response. And again, it's what will create this is going to be a lot of fast repetitions. And making sure we keep that speed high, that force output high. But through repetitions. They're going to have summation, which is when we start getting more and more muscle fibers and motor units contracting while others still are. So this is where bringing more of them in. Again, you had that very first line of defense through your first early contractions. But how many more can we continue? Can we continue having it be a net positive contraction? As long as every unit of time, we're engaging more motor units than are being forced in a relaxation because they're tired, then we can continually increase more force. Force will only start to decrease when more of them start hitting relaxation than are being turned on. So again, the more we can recruit in general, and the more we can keep recruiting them, then we can keep that force going. And again, that's going to happen from legitimate strength training. You have to do heavy training, and ideally for multiple reps and sets to have that continue to sum up and increase. And then last but not least, they call rate coding. And that is the ability to actually have them continue to fire over and over again, basically shortening that relaxation period and happening again. Again, there are actually some other very specific variations of these, but these are the main 4. I said because, for example, some muscle fibers can reach a point where they can start semi-contracting even while relaxed to create even more kind of additional force. I said that's again, that's one of those fairly elite advanced athlete types of movement. But getting that coding up, so getting the way they relax but get through it quickly and come back over and over and over again, that's going to be one of the key ones. Again, that's called rate coding. But continue getting those motor units to keep contracting. On the muscle fiber side, again, looking at just one individual muscle fiber, and they're made up of, we won't go any further than sarcomeres. And all that means is little tiny units of a single muscle fiber that have every piece needed to make a contraction happen. So sarcomeres make up the actual muscle fibers. Sarcomeres are what actually shorten to create pulling, which again is how a muscle moves the bones, is by pulling on that. Again, so they exist in lines. Again, like one sarcomere line basically goes from beginning to end, all the way from origin to insertion of a muscle fiber. And they're also stacked up in lines. Now, that stacking, when they're on top of each other, again, basically the thickness of the muscle is called, called a parallel formation. And that's what's going to be more responsible for the force created. And again, so think about how many, so if you were to look at any specific part of the muscle, and then, basically cut that part of the muscle out and look at how many sarcomeres there were in that little part of the muscle from top to bottom, the more of them you find, the more force that muscle can likely create. So whenever you work on strength training, and whenever you work on, even like adding on more effective functional muscle mass, you're looking at creating more of these, again, on top of each other or below each other in parallel. Now, when they're end on end, so from origin to insertion, that's called series formation, and that's when you get the speed. And again, this is because by creating more of them, again, speed work or very fast impulsive work will actually create more of these sarcomeres end on end. And so basically you have more, so your muscle's not going to get any longer. As much as some coaches will probably ask everybody here in their career at some point in time, we just want longer muscles. That's not actually ever going to happen, because it's not possible unless you decide to unattach it through surgery and attach it somewhere else. But otherwise, your muscles are not going to get longer. So whenever you're focusing on speed work and that really high explosive work, you'll actually start adding more of these sarcomeres end on end. So every sarcomere itself now has less real estate that it's in charge of. So basically, imagine these things are, I'm just going to make this number up, they're way smaller than this, but imagine that they were an inch. They're way smaller than that. But imagine they were an inch, and all of a sudden, you got more of them added in the same total distance of your muscle. So now they were only 3/4 of an inch. They don't have to move as far now to create movement, because their job is done faster. They don't have to do as much. That's how having sarcomeres in series works to create faster speed, is they all have less distance they're in charge of moving, so they can create that movement faster. And we'll get to how that actually applies here in a little bit. But then, so the muscle fibers themselves, and to me, this becomes one of the more accidentally misunderstood or misconstrued parts of training, especially when it comes to physiology. So the major types of muscle fibers are your type 1 muscle fibers, your type 2A, and your type 2X. Again, if you're in the middle of formal education with this, if you've had formal education with this, 2X used to be 2B. They changed it, I think, just to make a broader range to make it seem further apart. But there are also literally dozens of hybrid fibers, different types of fibers. They basically created it as a spectrum instead of just 3 types now. It used to be just type 1, type 2A, type 2B. They're like, well, we're going to make about 30 more types. So let's make it 1, 2A, and 2X. And now you have AB, AX, AC, B, there's all these different combinations that basically just get closer to one or the other. But again, still, to get the entire idea, all you still ever need to remember is these 3, that there's a 1, a 2A, and a 2X, which again, you don't even really need to remember unless you're taking a test, but you need to remember the idea. Type 1 fibers are your endurance fibers. Again, so all the things you typically correspond with endurance are type 1. They can last a really long time. They can be used over and over again. They have a very high resistance to fatigue. They don't get tired easily. They're very efficient, taking up very little energy, and they don't create very many waste products. Their downside is their low force, because again, like their efficiency muscle fibers. So force equals more energy being used. So the type 1s are very low force, so they're the weakest fibers, but they last the longest. So being able to keep that going. So those are endurance fibers. I'm going to skip one. Your type 2X fibers are the exact opposite. They're your big bad strength fibers. They create the biggest force output and also can contract the fastest in terms of pure force and energy. But they are throwing kind of everything in to make that happen. They get tired the most quickly, and also create so they're the least energy efficient. They also create the most waste product. They're just trying to create a whole lot of force and energy at once. They're not trying to make it last a long time. So again, they're your force and power ones. Your type 2Xs are also the ones that can typically get bigger. The biggest, I should say. Then your type 2As are like your general sweet spot muscle fibers. They're in the middle. They have relatively decent resistance to fatigue. They have relatively decent ability to create force. Again, they're the average to above average of all the other fibers. And those three things put together at the beginning, well, they tend to, for one, they will develop, but also kind of force some athletes into certain strengths or weaknesses. Again, so, some people may have a fairly even breakdown of all three. Some people may be heavily weighted in one or the other. Like everybody here knows people who are way more endurance oriented than others. And I don't mean just lifestyle. They've kind of, if you knew them, when they were young, they were almost always already able to go on forever. They had high amounts of endurance. And, maybe not super fast and not super strong, but they're endurance people. You can pretty much rest assured they have a very high type 1 ratio. On the flip side, everybody knows your people who, almost always naturally stronger. They can create high levels of force, or probably always on the bigger side, but endurance is something they've always had to work on. Even muscle endurance, not just cardio endurance. But so, your type 2Xs. And then, and again, so a lot of times they can help people almost pick a sport, in the idea that a lot of people tend to like sports that they find out they're better at when they're younger. So from that aspect, they have a more of an effect. Now, in terms of how to actually recruit them, so it's I'm going to go into that a little bit more detail again at the end to bring it all together. But the biggest thing to remember is that they do change. So with training, each type will get better at that and kind of swing a little bit. So if you're doing a lot of endurance training, your type 1 fibers are going to love that. Your type 2X fibers are going to hate it, but they will get slightly better at endurance. But unless you're doing strength training to go with it, they will lose some of that, if not to go with the endurance training. So this is where having a mixture of training types becomes very important, or making sure you're working on the right thing. The dumbest place this ever happens in sports is baseball, because baseball has one speed, and that's really, 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 really fast. Which again, if a lot of people think baseball doesn't do anything, when it comes to athletics. But again, everything that actually happens in baseball is really fast, and then there's a whole lot of rest. Yet it's this huge classic thing for coaches to send baseball guys on mile runs, 3-mile runs. It's the off season. Let's stay in shape. Season's long. Chris was a college baseball guy. I mean, so what was the longest run you guys had? Van Zandt made you guys run?
3 miles, I think.
That's probably longer. How many games do you think you actually had to How many games do you think you had to play in real life to run 3 miles total?
I would say the longest I ran in a baseball game was from the dugout to my position.
Right. The time you're not sprinting and speed doesn't matter.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So it's like, so you see that terribly there. So the idea.
That's why I chose baseball.
Yeah. So there's this idea of we're gonna create better shape and fitness, but you're actually having a much deeper response by actually training this athlete's type 1 fibers and making it harder for the fibers that matter, their type 2 X's that are the speed ones, to do their job well. So like I said, it's crazy how that actually happens. And the type 2 A's, if trained one way long enough, can actually become physically more like either the type 1s or the type 2 X's. Okay, so how does all this apply more so to sports performance, training, fitness, all that good stuff? So one we already covered is that recruitment is going to be the first thing that happens. Again, newbie gains, but also just after any break, recruitment is going to be that first thing that comes into play. As your muscle fibers and your motor units start being activated, or your trainees, I should say, excuse me, and they start being able to recruit a higher percentage of it. That comes first. Now, we talked about it from newbie gains. This actually also happens with advanced athletes after prolonged breaks. I don't think this has a name, but it's actually been shown that if you take an athlete who's again fairly advanced, fairly strong, and you put them in a long break, I'm not talking like a week, 2 weeks. I'm talking like 1 month plus, even up to several months. Again, they will be detrained at that point. They will have aspects of detraining. But they're like something about having all of the accumulated effects of training, of working out, of training, of working out, and then suddenly being hit with a prolonged rest period, with a prolonged inactivity period, will actually reset or like set a lot of athletes, advanced athletes, to a higher number of 2x than they had before. So we'll actually end up with that. Now they have almost no endurance, but I said they'll actually come back into training with the ability to create even more pure force than they were able to do before, because they basically become so rested, their body actually transformed a higher amount of 2A fibers into type 2X fibers, like waiting to be used at some point. But then it only lasts for like, once they start being activated again, that only actually applies for like a couple of weeks before they kind of go back to normal. But so it is just this crazy response at their really long break. It's not just that they're rested, but their muscle fibers will actually be more force oriented than when they left. And then you're kind of back to normal. So what this says, so this is like an advanced athletes only type thing. Again, is if you take them after if they take a break either because they had to, or if they're just doing like year-long training relatively correctly, but they also have that that one big peak area, whether it's the postseason and it's a true one sport athlete, so they don't have like, high school postseason, and then they have a couple of months and then they're suddenly in tournament ball, but so you have like that one, like the 1 year, one competition, like one big competitive period athlete who follows it with a good amount of time off. It actually can be more productive for that athlete to bring them back with some heavier training, some very low volume, heavier training, because that's what their body is actually ready for, and then working them more through like volume and progressing them again. Because I said they'll actually be better prepared to do things stronger, like higher force, higher speed for a very short amount of time. So whereas most of the time you bring people back into training and you focus more on getting that muscle endurance up, that strength endurance up, there actually are those cases every once in a while with elite athletes where it's better to bring them straight back into power and strength, and then take them back through, whatever endurance quality you feel like you need again. So that doesn't happen like too often, especially not with, say, like a middle school, high school level, but you can definitely see that if they've been advanced for a long time. Like, I'm going to single her out, for example, because it's fun. But for example, Jordan here is the youngest person here, but also has been training with me the longest. She's at about 5 years of training consistently in. And so like there's a reason that, for example, in her case, like she keeps coming back to training, and she keeps actually, as time goes on, spending more and more time on strength and power, less and less time on other endurance qualities. And again, why things are still changing now, she's still seeing exercises now that she never saw in the previous 4.5 years of training. Because again, like earlier, there was no point to be that specific. It was building up recruitment, building up recruitment, building up recruitment, building up strength, speed, and then doing that. She just did her first Jefferson squat the other day, example. Or deadlift, Jefferson deadlift. But so again, so recruitment comes first. Then building the parallel muscle fibers comes second. And that is, so that's the second goal. So again, that's we're looking at strength and size. So once you get past that initial recruitment period, train this, like where you should be training the skills, training the exercises, training the movements, taking advantage of that. Strength and size should be the next goal. So you're in essence building those muscle fibers again in parallel or stacking them on top of each other. Again, this is because by getting them stronger, you will be able to make everything else in the future better. So always focus on that. So focus on that next. Third will come the series of the muscle fibers, of the sarcomeres. So at that point, you're looking at them end on end and training more speed. So again, try to focus on getting that strength and that force production up first. Size, if it happens to be important for your athlete, but that doesn't necessarily matter, or for fitness. But at least strength up first, more force, and then focus on speed third. So again, recruitment, force, then speed. Because it is way more productive to get somebody stronger and then teach them how to be fast when they're stronger than to teach somebody how to be fast, then have them probably slow down a little bit while they're getting stronger, and then have to figure out how to be fast again after that. That would be the same type of thing. But again, if you get fast first and then spend time working on strength, that strength will not come over with the same speed development as what they had before, because you have new motor units you're looking at now. Again, the motor units that helped you become stronger were not the same ones being activated quickly before. So again, to focus on getting them recruited first, focus on getting them stronger second, and then focus on taking that higher percentage of muscle fibers and that higher force output and teaching it how to all be faster third. So that's going to take you to that actual peak power that athlete that people want. Then after that is when you start hitting more variation and specificity, such as in things as whether you're focusing on just quick impulse, quick reactive speed, or acceleration, or rate of force development, or pure strength again. But those first steps should always be recruitment first. Again, it's never going to help if you don't get the athlete to just learn how to use more of their motor units in general, then force to be stronger, and then teach that greater amount of fibers and greater force production to be fast. So that 1, 2, 3 step will always work and will always set your athlete up for better success than doing them in some other order. Okay, so anybody got any questions or things they want to add on that before I go into deeper into this?
Yeah, I just got one quick question. I'm actually gonna have to jump off here because I got to help stuff with my son. But when you were talking about the sport-specific stuff, when you talk about building up to a tournament and those types of things, when you're talking about that build up and then that stack and then that kind of slow off, is that basically almost the same concept as a taper? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
To a degree. It's so almost it's what leads to the taper, but it's not the taper itself. But it's kind of yeah. It makes the taper effective by putting them in the right place right beforehand. So then you throw in that recovery that allows them to get rid of the fatigue, and that's when like all of the things they've been training will be at their best because they're no longer because you're not tired. Yeah, but exactly. So it's like it won't work as well if you do those things out of order because your athlete won't be in the right place. Yeah, because like for almost every athlete, part of that there's the actual conditioning and the endurance, but the next thing that they want to be at peak levels for a taper is that speed and that power, that maximum speed. You want it to be the fastest they can possibly be, the most powerful they can be. Yeah, so if you didn't get them the chance to be stronger earlier and then focus on speed after that, then they won't be there when that taper comes around.
All right. Thank you. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yep, you got. Hey, man. So we're roughly an hour, 20 minutes in. Like I said, assuming the recording and all that works, I'm going to post this again later. So feel free to jump in hour, 20 minutes ish. Catch up the rest.
All right, man. Thanks.
You got it, man. Okay, so the next thing, it says kind of going deeper in that, and this is where I get like super jacked up and nerdy, is the speed strength continuum or the power continuum. Literally one of my favorite topics. So, and this is everything from speed through strength. Again, remember, they're different as we look at them, and they have different uses. Again, remember, they all come from the same thing, actually, which is just movement, which is just the movement that we're creating through the muscles themselves. And so all the way on one end of the continuum, you have pure max speed. Again, where the only thing that matters is how fast can we make it happen. All the other way on the other end is just pure maximum strength. Speed doesn't actually matter at all, other than just trying to get to that strength as high, like that strength level as high as we can. So the order of these, again, you have all the way on one end is max speed. Then you have what's called speed strength, which is still really fast, but with a higher amount of force production. Then you have the middle, which is generally called, like peak power or explosive power. So just like that high end of the curve where force and speed kind of hit in the right amounts to give you the most pure amount of power output. Then on the other end, you start getting the strength speed, which is mostly about creating force, but still with some acceleration or some speed left to it. And then you have maximum strength. The whole speed strength and strength speed thing can be confusing. Just always remember the first name is the one that matters most in that one. So again, speed strength is more speed. Strength speed is more strength. So again, you have those 5. So as you go through them, you can actually, like, especially once you start getting athletes fairly trained, then you can target these based on the intensity of the workout of the exercise itself. So if you're looking at pure speed, then generally anything under 30% of their maximum their maximum effort, or not effort, bad word, but their maximum ability to overcome strength. So we'll use a lift. I was trying to not use a lift specific, but so if they have a lift with a 1 rep max, it would basically be like under 30% of their 1 rep max, something like that. But again, same idea can be applied to things like sprinting or anything else. In a sprint, for example, like a 1 rep max might be considered running through like how much sand or how much weight can you pull, or if you've ever messed around with a forced treadmill, at what level can you still run? So that's how it would be applied to things like that. Again, like the force production of any movement. So 0 to 30% is going to be speed. That first 10%, so from basically completely unweighted, unresisted movement to 10% is where you're going to find max speed at. So this is like your sprinting. And to truly train maximum speed, you have to have your athletes spend time in 0 to 10%. So you can't do everything through force and through the force and the weights. So for maximum speed, to finally put that on like the top of the athlete, cherry, like the cherry on the cake, cherry pie, whatever. I lost my analogy, but screw it. They need to be 0 to 10%. So that means, for example, maximum speed sprinting has to happen if running is important to this athlete at all. They have to include some form of max speed sprinting somewhere in their training every once in a while to take everything else they've done and apply it to their maximum speed. The other place you like throws, or another one is, like for example, like baseball, it's a huge one. Like just baseball pitcher has to go out and throw normal baseballs to take that speed and turn it into a maximum speed at some point. 30% is when you start getting into more of that speed strength. So this is more of the ability to like build up and faster. Again, like think fast with an increase in force. So for example, building up acceleration, building up running speed, a track sprinter later on in the track, or a soccer player having to sprint a little, like, through their harder sprints and then having to generate an explosive force. That like speed strength. So that happens in like 30 to 60%, or 30 to 50%, 30 to 60% of max weights, max intensity. Remember, this is a continuum. So these things have overlap at each point because it all comes down from movement. Peak power is generally going to happen at about 60%, or really it can happen anywhere from about 40 to 70%. Again, depending on like the exercise, depending on the athlete. But that 60% tends to be like a key intensity level to start recruiting a higher amount of type 2 fibers to create more intensity from it, or more power. Strength speed occurs after that to about the 85% range. So from about 60 or 70 to 85, 90% is strength speed. Imagine your lineman coming off the line, instantly hitting another lineman and still trying to push him back. That's strength speed. Like that's what we're talking about. Or like wrestlers, like, when they're physically against each other, that is strength speed. It's how much force can they create, but can they do it a little bit faster than the other guy? And then you have your pure strength. It's like your power lifters or just your max lifts in general. How much can we get that? Now the crazy, max strength is going to happen mostly 85% and above. And it can actually go above 100% because you can also continue to build that max strength through the negatives, through the eccentrics, which can go up to 120 to 140% of your 1 rep max. So again, it doesn't have to stop at 100. Now, out of all of those, the least important one directly to sport is strength. But here's where it gets crazy. That's the least important one directly to a sport. But the single one that's going to help everything else be better continuously over time is strength. So it is impossible for an athlete to be too strong. It is like, that's something a lot of coaches say, and I hate it. They're like, they just feel like, they just have something about an athlete being too strong. That is physically impossible, because if everything else is equal, the athlete who can produce more force in the same amount of time with the same skills, or in the same movements like just as many times with endurance, is going to win if everything else is equal. What can happen, though, is an athlete can spend too much time working on strength when they should have focused on what else they needed. So again, strength, I always call it the Godfather quality. So again, you can always come back to it, keep improving it as much as you can for athletes or for trainees, keep improving that. But then again, when it comes down to the actual sport, it's usually not an important direct one, because what they actually need is to be explosive and fast. Or again, just to be like strong, but have some speed, like in that lineman example. So keep building that strength, but then choose the other ones. So what you can end up basically doing is take these with your athletes and literally like find where they're at in this continuum. Like I already gave like some of those. Like I said, like linemen are going to be more strength speed. Whereas say your linebackers, tight ends, those guys in football are going to be a little bit more peak power. They have to be a little bit more explosive. Your quarterbacks, your kickers, your DBs, etc., your receivers are going to be more speed, strength, and power. They still need to have a lot of force output, but they need to be even faster to go with it. Your kickers and your QBs have the least amount of force, and they're more speed, strength with it. Same thing, like a lot of strength. Most team sports, a lot of sports are going to be speed, strength is going to be their main quality. So looking at that like 30 to 50, 30 to 60% range for when you're last developing that main quality for their sport. but I said you can find other ones. Like say said baseball pitcher is going to be 0 to 10%. Like I said, like almost every sport you can find and you can break down in these qualities. And it may be different for upper body to lower body. So, but I said you can break those things down. Take that and then basically like reverse engineer how to get there for an athlete or a trainee. So if you know that they need more strength speed, then make sure, again, you're going to build up that recruitment. Then you're going to build up that strength, but then you're really going to hammer that lighter, faster acceleration to peak that right like when they're actually getting close to season. Anybody got any questions on that one? Like, is that something they ever cover at CPAS, Walter? Still there?
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed that. I just had to take a call from work, so like I missed like the past 4 minutes that you're talking about.
Oh, good. Like I said, it's hopefully going to be there. It says it's recording, so I think that'll work. But like I said, that's something that it sucks because I mean it's it's supported, it's there. I don't feel like enough time is spent on that when it comes to like programming or conditioning or like actual coaching. Again, it's had like say because that continuum is going to be what actually guides most of your decisions to get the most out of your physiology and your athletes. The last couple things I wanted to go over after that were basically just the key little details is one, like muscle fibers again. Like this is one place that a lot of people get tripped up on is because of their names and the way that they're given. Like type 1 fibers, they're relatively slow. Their speed is not their goal. Type 2X fibers, maximum force, maximum speed. But so, and especially for those of you guys looking to take exams later, there'll almost always be some questions about, which muscle fibers are like used first, which motor units when you're creating a movement or when you're in a movement. And it's actually the smallest, flimsiest ones. So your type 1 fibers will be the first ones that get activated and contracted by whether it's by athletes training, performing, by human beings, whatever. Your body wants to be efficient. Your body does not actually want to be explosive. So it's something that we're training. So it tries to be as efficient as possible first. So we have to force it to get to the more powerful fibers faster ourselves. That's why the high intensity that's why the high intensity, high strength training is important. You can bypass that. So there's something called Henneman's size principle. And it can be bypassed by basically plyos, especially higher intensity plyos, send such a shock to your nervous system that it can start using type 2 fibers sooner than your type 1 fibers, and also Olympic lifting. So again, same idea that it has like such a specific, almost plyometric-like effect and has to be explosive in a certain movement to work. Like, you can't really do slow Olympic lifting and you can't really do slow plyos. Those two things allow your body to bypass that and get to the faster fibers first. So anytime you have an athlete where power is a big goal that you're training, then you want to make at least one of those two things be a part of it. Plyos, or if you can, Olympic lifting. Dynamic lifting, like dynamic or compensatory acceleration or accommodating resistance, like powerlifting style, will get most of it. It'll get the power part of it, but it doesn't quite hit the size principle portion. You still get the really high levels on it, of course, just talking about that last little few percent. And then the last thing was also, like I mentioned before, about detraining windows and speed. And this kind of goes with that really long break athletes actually being ready to exert more power thing, is that strength and basic endurance will last for a solid 4 to 5, even 4 to 6 weeks without training them if you train them long enough. But speed, however, will start to drop off after only a week or two. So keeping that speed up whenever like peak condition is like the most important thing when we're staying like game shape, competition shape. Keeping that speed up and not letting it detrain by keeping some amount of max speed work and max power work into training every 1 to 2 weeks is going to be huge to make sure that athlete doesn't detrain. But even just like 1 or 2 heavy training sessions per month will help an athlete at least keep their strength level up so they can continue to focus on everything else. So that's like where I mentioned before, it's impossible to be too strong, but you can spend too much time training your strength. So when it really comes down to game fitness, etc., you can just have 1 or 2 heavy training sessions to keep that max strength up per month, and the rest of the time focus it on keep working on that speed and that peak power. So you'll keep those going. So anybody got any question in at that? I've officially exhausted my notes. And I'm staring at my frozen screen. Nobody else is frozen, by the way. It's literally just me all the time.
I think I'm frozen.
But nobody's got anything?
No, I think you covered most of it, man.
Yeah, you always do, Jerry.
So, cool. All right. Sweet. I'm going to try to do these fairly often, fairly regularly based, especially right now, lockdown period, but to keep it going, keep afterwards. So it's just actually fun getting up here and teaching again, going through it again. But, guys, I appreciate all you guys joining this thing. Very cool of you guys to do that. So, it's been saying recording, so I do plan on putting this up tomorrow morning, as long as all that works. So, whether if it's to check something out again, or even just, if you did know other people who might get something out of it, whether for school reasons or just because coaches who love to talk about the stuff and hear about it, by all means, feel free to share it with them, tag them in it, stuff like that. And we really appreciate that too. All right. You guys all be safe. Keep kicking ass to everything you're doing, man. See you guys later.
Appreciate it, Jerry. Have a good one. Be safe, everybody.
You got it. Good times. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Bye, Jerry.
Y'all.
See you, Chris. See you, Dom. See you, Jordan. See you, Paul. See you, Andrew. See you, Calvin. See you, Walter.
Thanks, Jerry.
See you guys.
Thanks, Jerry.
Try to make sure you don't mess this up.